I call to order the regular city council meeting for this Monday, January 5th. If you all would be so kind, please silence your cell phones as we begin the meeting. First item on our agenda tonight is roll call.
Lessem.
Here.
Fuller.
Here.
Hayes.
Here.
Janser.
Here,
Olson. Here. Pittner. Here. Samuelson.
Here.
please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3 is the mayor's report. The mayor was, I was out of town and had family visiting for quite a few days since our last meeting, and so I don't have anything specific to report. Obviously attended the normal committee meetings, chamber board, and those kinds of things as they happened. We'll move on to number 4, which is the city manager's report. And city manager Tom Joyce is still recovering from some illness, and so he's not with us tonight, but we have Finance Director Lakefield filling in.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there was a city manager report attached to the agenda. I would entertain any questions if there are any about that, and then I have one announcement I'd like to make after that.
Any questions regarding the city manager's report? If not, go ahead with your announcement.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I just wanted to introduce to you tonight our one of our newest additions to the city, filling our grant manager position, and she's in the gallery tonight. Jody Erickson is our new grant manager, and she comes to us from Kansas. She's a North Dakota native, and she brings with her a wealth of federal government experience, so we're excited to have her on board. And we just wanted to introduce her so that you folks knew who she was, and I'm sure we'll have lots of contact with her in the near future. Thank you, Jody.
All right, thank you very much, and welcome, Jody. Great to have you on board. Next up is the city attorney's report. City attorney.
Mayor, members of council, I provided a written report, and I can stand for any questions at this time.
Any questions for the city attorney? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate your written report, and we will move on. Section 5 is the Planning Commission. Item 5.2 is a public hearing on case number 2025-50, the Lakeview 5th Edition preliminary plat and zoning map amendment. So this is a public hearing on the item. Anybody who wishes to speak for or against, please come forward at this time. Anyone wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, council, what are your wishes?
Make motion to close the public hearing and approve as presented.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote.
Mike, did you get a vote, Mike? The motion passed unanimously.
Next item is 5.3. This is another public hearing on case number 2025-52, the 1920 Valley Street zoning map amendment. Is there anyone here to speak on this item, either for or against? This is a zoning map amendment that is recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. Seeing no people coming forward, is there a motion? Alderman Blessing.
Move that we close the public hearing and approve the item as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, please go ahead and cast your votes.
The motion passed with an abstain from Alderman Hayes.
Okay, thank you. Item 5.4 is a public hearing on case number 2025-53. This is the Almy Second Edition Preliminary Plat Zoning Map Amendment. And this is a public hearing regarding that second edition of the Almy plat. Anybody wish to speak for or against this item? Anybody wish to speak? Council? Alderman Olson.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we
Oh,
close the public
hold on.
hearing. No. Not.
I
Yes.
think somebody was
I
moving,
move
not,
that we close the public
not
hearing.
coming to the
and
podium.
accept the item as presented.
okay, that's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by, or seconded by Alderman Samuelson. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and cast our votes.
The motion passed unanimously.
All right, that completes section 5. We'll move on to section 6, which also, first item, 6.1, is also a public hearing. This is for a public hearing on the FY 2024 CDBG Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, sometimes known as CAPER. And so this is a public hearing on the CDBG Annual Performance Report for '24. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this? Seeing no one, there a motion by the member of the council? Alderman Fuller.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing and approve as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Olson. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, please cast your votes.
The motion passed unanimously.
We move on to 6.2. 6.2 is a public hearing on the Renaissance Zone final approval of case number M-101, property located at 215, 217, and 219 Fifth Avenue Northwest. The recommendation is to approve and forward this to the state of North Dakota for final approval. The documentation has been received from the recipient. Anybody wish to speak to this? Seeing no one, action by the council. Alderman Pittner.
Mayor, I'll move that we close the public hearing and approve the item as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the item as presented. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, let's go ahead and cast our votes.
The motion passed 6-1 with dissent from Alderman Samuelson.
We now move on to section 7, which is consent items. This section is typically recommended and passed without discussion. I have been asked to pull item 7.16. Council, what are your wishes on the remaining items, or is there any other item that anybody would like to have pulled for specific individual discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the other 16 consent items as presented.
Okay?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent items other than 7.16. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's cast our votes.
The motion passed unanimously.
We're now at 7.16 in the consent agenda. This is a recommendation to approve HR Program Manager and HR Payroll, HRIS Manager roles. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Got a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Alderman Blessam, you pulled this item. I'll
Yep. Thank you, Mr.
talk to
Mayor.
you first.
So, and Kelly, I appreciate your willingness to come, but I don't think you'll need to. That's not exactly my point. So these types of items, as they come through, I feel it's important that we keep an eye on, because this is a very easy way for our budgets to grow without us ever even thinking about it. And so here we're realigning a couple jobs, which, we've got our HR director who's done a fabulous job to this point as the one leading this. It's right in her department, so I have no doubt that it's the right thing to do. At the same time, it's our role to make sure that we're overseeing this stuff. And so I just want to make sure that it was kind of publicly said that we have to keep an eye here, even though there are no salary adjustments that are proposed at this moment. Just the simple change in pay grades means that we're signing up for additional funds down the road. And so that's what's going to happen with this. And so I felt it was important that we vote on it separately. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing none, apparently we're ready to vote. Please cast your votes.
The motion passed unanimously.
That completes section 7, and we will move on now to section 8, which are the action items, starting with 8.1, and this is the 3rd Street Bridge Repair Prioritization Report. And Lance is going to give us a bit of a presentation on the content. So take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight online, I have Jordan Gerber and Casey McNames with KLJ. They're a consultant on the 3rd Street Bridge Repair Project that we completed here over the summer. Just to refresh your memory, council authorized us to enter into a task order with KLJ to look through some of the previous reports that we've had from the DOT and help us to try to put our hands around what repairs are coming in the future if we want to keep the bridge in service, what that might cost, and then come up with some action plans. So tonight, the only thing we're really presenting to you is the findings that we have in that report. We still need to confer with the DOT and try to work through some schedules and budgeting and those sort of things, and we'll bring that back to you at a future time. But I felt it was important tonight, as we conclude that study, to get that information in front of you. We're going to start talking about capital improvement plans here in the next couple of months. So I think it's valuable information for you all to keep in mind as we go. So if we have Jordan online, we can switch over to him, and he'll guide you through the presentation and the report. If you have any questions for myself or the team after he's done, just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Just confirm you can hear me okay?
Yes, indeed. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm here tonight, just to, as Lance mentioned, to provide some additional background and context on the 3rd Street Bridge Report, which is attached to tonight's agenda. I'm hoping to provide some background on some of the technical elements and provide a forum to answer any questions you may have. Noting the pictures I'm showing tonight, there's kind of a brief portion of the overall bridge. Obviously, it's a pretty large structure, and so we're only hitting a few key elements. So I refer you to the bridge term inspection reports and our summary report for more specific information. 3rd Street Bridge, it's a pretty unique structure, reflecting kind of the complexity of the site. It's curved structure on the north end. Then we have the river crossing. We have the BNSF track crossing. Then this, on the south end as well, we have a fourth kind of different superstructure. So it's kind of a 4-unit structure overall. So like I said, 4th unit on the south, 3rd units over the railroad tracks. We have the river span, and then the curve span on the north end. Just with this structure being so unique and having all these different pieces, there's a lot of moving elements. I'll try to describe the different pieces here for you. Speaking more generically, looking at the north end of the bridge superstructure is the top of the deck. The bridge deck is your driving surface. Bridge railing and barrier are the safety elements attached to that. The bridge deck sits on bridge girders, and those girders sit on bridge bearings. Moving to the substructure. Substructures are what carry that load then down to the foundations of the ground. This bridge was built in 1936. There was a major rehabilitation that was completed in 1985. The 1985 rehabilitation redid mill and overlay across the deck surface, took away a sidewalk on the east side of the bridge, and then put in new barrier and the sidewalk on the west side of the bridge. Additional pier repair work was initially completed in the early 2010s on several piers, and then as Lance noted, we completed additional work on piers 3 and 4 last year, as well as added some bridge drains. Draw your attention to the typical section here, and note on the north side with the bridge curve, we have what's called the bridge super elevation. Think of it tilted or banked. That collects a lot of water on that east side, and so that was part of the reason for installing those bridge drains. That water, that salt infiltration is part of the deterioration that we've discovered and been discussing in the report. Looking more specifically at some of the bridge elements of the superstructure, we have the bridge deck and the joints. The bridge deck, as noted, was repaired in 1985 and is overall in pretty good condition. There's some aggregate surface. The clear cover is coming off a little bit. There's some cracking, but overall the deck concrete itself is in good shape. The bridge joints, however, have seen better days. We repaired almost all of the bridge joints this summer. Here you can see Pier 4 before the rehabilitation was completed. You can see that rubber seal had completely failed, and all the water would fall through the deck at that point. Based on the type of bridge and the age of the design, here at Pier 5 you can see this is what's called a fixed joint. So there's no expansion intended to happen here, but there's still a joint. In current design, our goal would be to eliminate these types of joints wherever possible, just for maintenance purposes. Based on the design of the bridge at this time, you'll see fixed joints. We did complete a few minor deck repairs. You can see one on the side here. A lot of the deck repairs that were needed were along these joints that we repaired. Looking at the underside of the deck, you can see a little bit more corrosion deterioration. Here's the east overhang underneath that barrier. You can see some spalling, some section loss, and some corrosion happening. This is fairly typical along the east overhang. And the south end of the bridge that Unit 4 is talking about, we have what's called a pin and hanger system. So one part of the bridge is hanging from this pin. And when we do that, we have this thickened section of the deck called a drop slab. You can see the west side is our low end on the south end of the bridge, or I should say the south side is the low end. And so this drop slab, you can see the significant deterioration that's occurring there compared to this side, just due to the geometry of the structure. The barrier I noted on the top side is overall in fair condition. Barrier is one of the first things that's going to see that salt and corrosion where it doesn't go through the deck joints. So you'll see cracking sporadically down the whole length of the bridge. You'll see salt, you see ice, plow damage that have affected the barrier. Overall, the barrier's in okay condition, but a lot of visible defects throughout there. Moving below the deck, looking at the girders. The girders are your primary structural elements running parallel with the traffic. This bridge is made up of steel built-up members into an I-beam shape. So At this time, easily available members were built up together and formed one structural section and then formed together with rivets. So overall acting as one unit. Over time, water infiltrates through those deck joints and can get stuck between these adjacent layers. When trapped like this, it creates a condition called pack rust. When steel corrodes, the chemical action causes swelling, and that in normal conditions that would shed off in a scaling type thing. I'm sure you've seen that on vehicles before. But when trapped on a bridge like this, that scaling continues and that chemical reaction continues, and with nowhere to go, it starts stressing and bending the steel. So this element is called a bearing stiffener. It's part of the vertical load path, carrying the load down to the bearings. And in several locations, especially on the fascia or exterior girders, that swelling is expanded by up to 1.5 inches. So a lot of defects happening there. That reduces our structural capacity over time. Also, as that grows, you can see on the second picture here, it can cause those rivets to fail. And so there's a few locations that have missing rivets caused by that pack rust expansion. Continuous throughout the bridge, essentially at the joint locations, you'll see surface pitting, corrosion, with areas of more significant damage around those joints. Looking again at the underside of the deck, this is the deck looking up, this is the top of the girder. You can see here that concrete has separated from the girder. The deck and the steel normally work together in what's called composite action. It kind of provides the best of both materials, concrete and steel. On this bridge, with the corrosion traveling along from the deck joints, is eroded the concrete in this location. What that causes is it's caused what's called unbraced length is affected, and so the length of the girder that is fully braced by the deck is reduced. A load rating was completed this last summer to confirm the bridge condition with this element, and it still remains structurally sound, with the consideration of a few other bridge elements we'll talk about in a moment. The right side picture here shows the outside of that pin hanger. Again, so the left side of the bridge is hanging from that pin. You see the defects to the other side of the joint with the water coming to the south. These pins themselves were evaluated in 2021 as part of a standard safety inspection. They're due for their inspection follow-up next year in 2027. These require specialized ultrasonic testing equipment to evaluate those, but there are no concerns found with those pins and hangers. Lateral bracing is present on the bridge. This helps to brace the girders laterally and transfer wind and construction loads to the substructures. It's normally what would be considered a secondary member, unlike the girders, which are primary members. Lateral bracing itself takes generally one of 3 types. So we have diagonal bracing, kind of zigzagging forth throughout the bridge. That's typically used as a construction brace, and then is also, again, as a secondary member during the life of this bridge. The last 2 types generally perform the same function. They would be considered diaphragms and cross frames. Both items provide key lateral support to help transfer loads from the deck and the girders down to the bearings at the substructures. Cross frames would just be defined as a truss type system. You can see a K type truss frame here, cross frame here. Whereas diaphragms are made of one larger member. We'll see that in a moment at Pier 3. The previous noted load rating that was completed, that was looking at the separation of the deck and that composite action. Those lateral bracing members are assumed to be fully functional. As you can see, there are some locations where this is not the case. You can see this is looking up at the bridge from underneath. This is a diagonal coming into this gusset plate, a diagonal coming in, and this is part of the cross frame connection. So this gusset plate is one of the areas that we've identified that would need to be repaired. Moving down from the girders, we have the bearings. Bridge bearings transfer the load, again, from the girders down to the substructures. There are generally 2 types of bearings. You have fixed bearings, as shown on the left here, which don't allow any horizontal movement. And then you have expansion bearings, which allow horizontal movement. These rocker bearings are being undermined in some locations. We took care of this on Piers 3 and 4 as part of the project from last year, but there are additional areas that are identified as needing work and are currently part of the program repairs that we are working on for 2026 or 2027. That work is in BNSF right away, and so that is part of that discussion. The expansion bearings themselves are supposed to rock and move, but there are several locations, particularly in Unit 4 on the south end again, where those, you'll notice the central axis of that bearing is offset. That's ideally is allowed because that's the expansion that's happening. But you'll see here, this inspection was completed in mid-May, and so not our warmest temperatures of the year, and yet the expansion is almost completely used up. And so when you have bridge expansion that can't happen when it's supposed to, those forces could build up in different elements of the bridge. So I could see cracking in the substructure as those forces are translated, or you may see it in the deck. So far, that damage has been minimal to date, but that's something that we're continuing to monitor. Piers are the foundational elements below the bearings. So remind you of Pier 3. This is Pier 3 as it consisted in 2022. The substructure concrete is soft. It's soft, relatively soft, I should say. For its age, it's appropriate, but it's obviously corroding and deteriorating. You'll notice in the span of 3 years, what looked concerning became alarming. And so in 2025, that's why we were brought in. IBI was the contractor who was brought in to repair this work. So to repair that section, what we had to do is you remove the load from this girder. You can see the bottom of the bearing there. That's that undermining I was referring to earlier. We remove all the loose concrete, expose the rebar so that we can provide concrete that can bond properly to there and restore the strength and capacity of the section. Once the concrete was repaired, we completed a fiber reinforced polymer mat to protect it and increase the strength of that repair. So this work, as you'll see on Pier 3, is similar work that we're going to need to do on some of the other piers. Pier 5, this is the first pier south of the river. You can see similar defects forming to what Pier 3 looked like a few years ago. So without further action, this is going to continue to spall, continue to deteriorate. We're going to lose section underneath this bearing and cause undermining. And so this is one of the piers noted for repair. This is Pier 8. This is south of the BNSF tracks. This is pretty similar to what Pier 4 looked like a couple years ago. Pier 4 was worse than this. What you see here is called delamination. So the cover concrete had separated from the rebar and is falling off. That cover concrete is there to protect the reinforcing, and so it's something that we need to repair as well. You see on the column similar spalls and cracks that are being formed. They're also repaired in a similar manner. Pier 9. Pier 9 has some additional spalling noted all throughout the column. Of more immediate concern is the undermining of that bearing. You see tape measure is measured about 6 inches of undermining underneath that bearing pad. And so this is an area that's going to need repair sooner than later. The repair types here at Pier 9 is going to be very similar again to Piers 3, Piers 4. Jack up the superstructure to remove that load so that we can get into that rebar cage and get good solid bond restored. With that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I want to turn it back over to you for any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right, are there any questions for KLJ? All right, seeing none. City engineer, anything further?
No, nothing further, Mr. Mayor. Like I mentioned before, we'll be back in front of you here this spring as we are able to confer with some others and put together an action plan and bring it back to you.
Okay, very
Thank
well. Good information, and obviously something we're gonna have to deal with going forward here. That takes us on in the agenda to 8.2, which is the alcohol ordinance comprehensive rewrite. As you may remember, we had looked at the alcohol ordinance a couple meetings back and given our city attorney some direction to make some changes and additions, and now it's back before us. So, city attorney, you want to comment or speak to this first?
Yes, please, Mayor. Mayor, members of City Council, so the change that you're going to see that's the most significant in this draft is to Section 5-12, which includes the off-sale liquor license. That's included in now in our retail license categories. There really aren't that many changes from prior drafts that you'll see here in this particular instance. We did meet with attorneys Merchant and Hoffert this afternoon, and as well as Melissa Wright. And one thing that we did discuss was the effective date of this ordinance. And so looking at the draft that you have in front of you, I see here that it says the ordinance shall be effective upon final passage and approval. And so while drafting this, it's always been contemplated that we would have a January 1st effective date of 2027. That would give license owners and the city staff a full year to prepare, advertise, do a PR campaign to kind of advise everyone as to what these changes are going to look like, with the final effective date being January 1st of next year. That would give us time to also pass the fee resolution that's contemplated under this ordinance, along with our budget changes that are made. So the first thing I would ask the council to consider here is to entertain a motion to amend the draft that you have in front of you to contemplate the January 1st, 2027 effective date that's been discussed.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded to change the effective date to January 1st, 2027. Is there any discussion of that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote.
The motion passed unanimously.
Continue.
So that's the primary change that was discussed this afternoon. Another conversation point that was raised is that Grand Forks, with their off-sale license, they do have an issuance fee that they issue as well. So that's something that the council can consider, do some research on, take that into consideration. The fee resolution is not before the council tonight, as mentioned. We contemplate that always coming forward as a part of the city's budget process, because that's where a lot of the fee and rate resolutions come through the city council for approval. So that's not here now, but that's something that you could see coming along with that fee resolution in the future. So, but I can stand for any questions about the ordinance as it currently sits at this time.
Any questions for the city attorney? All right, seeing none. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the ordinance on first reading, the draft ordinance as it is, to approve on first reading. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, let's cast our votes.
The motion passed unanimously.
Okay, that takes us to item 8.3. This is a discussion of a funding request for Sunset Boulevard and US 83 Bypass Interchange policy discussion, excuse me. These are issues that have been raised, and I guess, I don't know if city staff wants to speak to this first. Lance, do you want to kind of tee this up for us, please? City engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there's a lot to chew on in this one, and I debated whether I should split these two apart, but they're also related to each other, so I decided to keep them in one item. Way back a decade ago, when we were developing potentially about 600 acres of land up in northwest Minot, we started doing some long-term planning with the DOT to figure out how we're going to accommodate all this traffic. And the decision was at the time, do we want the bypass to become an expressway similar to US 2 and 52, or do we try to have a larger vision of maybe having a more of a freeway type concept on that corridor? But obviously, that would be in several stages. First, it had to be 4 lanes, so that was before the 4-laning project. And then over time, when funding allowed, interchanges would be built. That plan seemed very feasible back then, but now since development has stalled up in that area, and the projections aren't nearly as fast as they were about a decade ago. So 21st Avenue is one of the preferred interchange sites just because of its location and potential for future growth around that corridor. Ties back into Broadway and the airport nicely. So staff was working with the developers in that area to start dedicating right-of-way necessary for future interchanges. Obviously, the Sunset Boulevard question has been one that's been floating around for quite a while. Currently, we do not have public right-of-way dedicated over that corridor. It's a series of easements. It's an access and utility easement. So if we were going to invest city dollars in there, we would want that to be dedicated public right-of-way. We'd want the land annexed into the city of Minot so that our tax dollars would go to support the maintenance of that roadway. So those are just a couple of the things in front of you tonight. The policy, the way that it was written that if any changes are made to it, it's done by resolution. So depending on what you all decide tonight or at a different meeting, staff would come back with a resolution that would address how you direct us to proceed. So I can take any preliminary questions if you have any. I know Dr. Whitman is here in case you have questions for him or he might want to say something, but.
Okay, questions for the city engineer? Alderman Blessam.
Yeah, thank you. Lance, so at the corner of the bypass and 21st, the main big intersection we're talking about there, in your mind, what does the future of that look like? I'm not even looking at growth. If would we have a project coming relatively soon to redo that intersection, to whether it's an overpass, something where we're not having traffic meeting? Is that contemplated? Is that coming? Should we be preparing for that now? Or is that really growth related? I guess if that helps to ask it that way.
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessam, it's 100% growth related. So the DOT will not support an interchange at that location until traffic volumes break down where the intersection would lose a level of service, probably into that E or F. Interchanges are extremely expensive. It probably costs us close to $40 million to build one. And so for us to have a project like that would be very distant in the future. But obviously it gets complicated if there's a building or something at that corner. Now our interchange has to look a lot different. We're using more bridges, which then increases the cost. So that's why the policy was developed way back when, is to try to identify those corridors and try to preserve that right of way now before development would happen and the project would essentially become unfeasible because of cost.
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Fuller.
Lance, so 10 years ago, we thought we needed it. I mean, in your opinion, do we need that policy today then?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Fuller, I think the policy itself is important. Even if we don't move forward with the freeway concept, that's that's in the current policy. Things like access management, restricting access onto the bypass, all of those things will help us with the longevity of those corridors so that they function adequately now and into the future. Like you've heard us talk before, the more access points you put on arterials, the more congested they become. And so those policy elements are good to retain. I think what council should probably decide on soon is do we abandon the freeway concept and potentially go to an expressway someday if that's the case? Or maybe if it's still important, we keep that. But then it's, do we pay for the right of way? Do we have it dedicated? Those were some of the contentious points back then when the policy was developed.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Hayes.
I'll say, Lance, currently today with the policy in effect, first off, we'll go back to Sunset Boulevard. 2008, Dr. Whitman had given an easement for pennies on the dollar back then. 5 years later, the bypass development was implemented. Since the easement was granted on Sunset, then they installed 5 years later, I believe it was, the sewer and water to service north of 21st. Okay, and then the policy was implemented shortly before there was a big business coming in up there. This policy, as it stands, encumbers Dr. Whitman's property, does it not? As far as they would take 6 to 8 acres of his land, as well as across the bypass, there's 4 lots for sale currently, and the frontage road, it looks like, according to this policy, that's unbuildable as well because it has this policy in effect that may get implemented someday, sometime. Am I correct on that?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Hayes, it would really affect the undeveloped portions of property at this point. So the developed portions or the platted portions, if a project would move forward immediately, the city would have to purchase that right away. The way that the policy is written today, the land would have to be dedicated. So when the big business was coming in earlier, that's why it was slid over to the east more, so that the council could work through what they're going to do with that large right-of-way issue back then, whether to buy it or to have it dedicated. So that's how we worked through that issue initially. Now with this development coming on again and looking for action, I thought it was time to bring that back to this council to make sure that that's still the route we want to go or if we want to change, just so that we as staff have direction from council on what the future holds for that corridor.
Okay, so back to the encumbrance on the properties, the 4 lots on the west side of the bypass, those are basically rendered useless. It's unfeasible to be able to build anything with the current policy in effect with that bypass road going through the middle of them.
Well, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Hayes, the difference is those lots are already created and entitled. Where right now this land is zone ag, it's not annexed, so that's the difference between the east side versus the west side of the bypass. So if a project would go today, then all that land would have to be purchased.
All those lots?
Correct.
Correct. But if I was to purchase, if I was a buyer and purchase those lots, you wouldn't have any idea about this policy that affects that because it's not on the title reports, is it?
No, it's not. It's a city council adopted policy.
So nobody would know about this unless you started digging in to doing a DRT and start looking at building on any of those 4 up the line at the old Caldac cabinets that it takes out 3/4 of those buildings with this policy. So there's nothing that can be done with those properties as well for something down the road 20 years, 30 years, if ever.
If ever.
So.
Alderman Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Lance, I guess maybe what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't sound like DOT thinks we're going to need a freeway there, and it doesn't sound like the city or you believe we're going to need a freeway there anytime in the future. So is the expressway the best way to go? Should we change this policy and say, hey, it's going to be expressway and take the encumbrances off all the land?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Fuller, it's a tough call because the way that the city is growing right now, we would need a freeway concept there for many, many decades, if ever.
Yeah, we'll be gone.
We will be gone. The issue is when you get into, city engineering, city planning, it's our job is to look future and try to forecast it. And things change, right? I mean, just a few years ago, we were approving every plat that came across our desk, and there was hundreds and hundreds of acres, and we didn't know how to extend streets and utilities to all that. And well, now you fast forward a little bit, and that's all changed. And so that's why it's always important to update transportation plans, comprehensive plans, because, the world changes and we have to be adaptable to that. So as I see it right now, we wouldn't need a freeway there for the foreseeable future. Just keep in mind that if land development happens along where these potential interchanges are, that might restrict us from being able to adopt that concept in the future. So I just wanted to make you aware of that as you make your decisions.
Alderman Fuller,
I
continue.
guess more from my colleagues than anybody else, then do we want to direct the city and Lance to bring us language that says, hey, we're going to get rid of the freeway concept and look at an expressway and see what that looks like in the next couple meetings? I mean, is that doable for you, Lance, or?
Yeah, I think probably by the mid-February meeting, we'd have something drafted for you.
Alderman Hayes.
And then on your memo here, under the B, service delivery impact, it says if the right-of-way is not acquired, meaning either the 4 lots on the other side or Dr. Whitman's property, land development occurs, it will likely be cost prohibitive to develop the 83 bypass into a freeway system in the future. So you're saying it's unaffordable unless, so it's a kind of a wait and see. If Dr. Whitman wants to do something, then he's got to pay for it. Give up that land at acreage price, pennies on the dollar.
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Hayes, or the alternative is the policy can be amended where the city would buy the potential right-of-way. Or you get rid of the policy regarding the freeway completely. So you have several options which you can go by. I think the point of what I was trying to make is, let's say that all that land develops and there's multi-million-dollar buildings along where that right-of-way would be required. It just wouldn't make financial sense to try to acquire all that property, remove the buildings, and relocate those buildings to meet the Uniform Relocation Act to try to build that freeway. It's just not going to pencil.
But if Dr. Whitman would have to develop currently, then the city would go into a negotiations to purchase that land, that's 6 to 8 acres, whatever it might be, which again would be pennies on the dollar in comparison to what commercial property's worth. It's all divided up. The more you have, the more you can disperse those costs across. And then plus that property is straddled with a gas main that cuts through it, a diagonal through it. So that makes by taking that corner out of there, it makes it even tougher to develop that piece of property. It's a very sought after piece of property if it was developed or closer to development. If you take that out of there, that stops the chances of a big box store, whoever it may be, coming in there, puts it into small retail. Back to the Sunset Boulevard, it kind of is 2 pieces there. If that's, the city sees their way to fund that, that's the mechanism to get that growth started there. That growth in that piece of property with gas station, retail will instantly take off. No doubt on North Hill. It'll help with the traffic control, with sidewalk safety for kids, the traffic from coming from the south. If it was dedicated as a emergency access, why don't we close it off? Because you'd have about 500 people in here yelling and screaming because now they got to drive clear around up to the bypass and around to get to the high school. So now it's not just an emergency access, and I just feel we're taking advantage of Dr. Whitman and his, niceness to give an easement to begin with and to allow, utilities to go in the same easement. And now we're tying his hands for development.
And I think what you're seeing is this land has evolved over time, right? So back when there wasn't really anything up in northwest Minot, the easement made sense. Just wasn't a lot of traffic up there. But as developments happen, as the Eagles Landing subdivision is developed, as there's now a new high school up there, it's just different. So I don't think anybody was trying to take advantage. It's just the situation's evolved over time.
Alderman Fuller.
Mr. Mayor, then I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to direct city staff to amend the policy, forgetting the freeway policy, bring us back expressway policy language, and with us purchasing right away instead of taking it.
Second.
I'll say, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Alderman Hayes.
I believe this has to be done through a resolution, doesn't it? Instead of a change of policy?
Yes.
Yes, and that's what I believe, Mayor Janser and Alderman Hayes, I believe Lance was proposing that. So this would give us direction as to what to include in that resolution, and it would come back here.
Okay. Further discussion? Alderman Pittner.
Lance, where would that leave us then on the second part of this question of paving Sunset Boulevard? Where does that leave that process?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Pittner, that's a separate question that's still up for you all to decide.
So just to clarify,
Clerk.
just to clarify, is it to direct city staff to amend the policy with an expressway and purchase of right-of-way?
Yeah, so what Lance, I believe, had said, if I'm correct, is currently it's written as a freeway policy. I would amend the policy to get rid of the freeway, bring in the expressway, which we think is probably more feasible, and then instead of taking property, we would purchase right away as we need it going forward. Is that
That's correct.
okay?
Alderman Hayes.
And there are some tentative sketches if it was made an expressway, because I know if let's say there was development on this property and you're a semi coming off of the bypass, that corner at the light there onto 21st is undoable. You drive onto the shoulder and almost hit the pole there. So there are some preliminary designs to address that if it was an expressway, to make it a little more pliable to make that corner for deliveries.
Yes, in the future, when 21st Avenue gets reconstructed into an urban section, we'd realign that roadway and try to get some of that curve out of there.
Okay, any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and vote on that.
The motion passed unanimously.
All right, and so I guess in this item, we also have the piece about the Sunset Boulevard and what to do with that. Alderman Hayes.
I think the construction or the funding for it, I think, is going to take a little more discussion of what the options are for the city, because that's a big pill to swallow, and where the funding would come from. So I don't think that's something that's going to be achieved tonight. I think it's for a later date for the funding for that roadway.
Alderman Hayes, is that something where maybe you'd want to ask the city finance director to sort of look at some things and bring that back
Yes.
to us? Okay. Alderman Pittner.
Dave, I think it was city sales tax infrastructure dollars was kind of the earmark cost. Anything off the top of your head as far as funding mechanisms for that?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that would be a likely source that we could tap into some of that. There would be a number of other avenues that we could look at. Special assessment, all are part of the project. There would be a number of different items that we would probably look at all of the above. once we get a better idea of what the cost of that would be as well.
Alderman Blessam.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I think with what we have in front of us tonight, we have more than enough to help set some direction at least. I think this council right now has enough in front of us to determine whether the city and therefore the taxpayer is going to foot the bill directly for this. I think we can decide that and have that part done, because if we're going to, then yeah, that gives Dave a lot of places where we need to go look for that. If we're not comfortable with doing that and we're going to look at something more along the lines of a special assessment, then that's a different direction. So I guess I would urge my colleagues, if there is somebody who's got an opinion about the direction we should go, that we have that motion now and we start giving some direction here, because this, I think we've got enough to understand it. We've got a long history of not doing this in terms of the city, just doing it. We don't just buy streets in new developments. So if we're going to change that, then we need a motion to start changing it.
Alderman Fuller.
Just in looking at this and some of the discussions and stuff I've had, I think I wouldn't be in favor of the city paying for this. I would be in favor of the city paying for it with special assessments on the lots, with caveats that in 3 to 5 years, if we haven't been paid back, the developer pays us the remainder, and then he can collect as he sells the lots. Because usually specials on commercial lots like this, they are paid in full when the commercial property is sold. And so if we're going to do it, and we can special assess those lots as big box stores, retail stores, restaurants, whatever comes in there, we would be paid back in a short order. But I don't want another big M building happening where all of a sudden it falls through and after 3 or 5 years, no lots have been sold. So if we're going to go this route, I think there has to be some hooks to it, meaning, we'll fund it, but if we aren't paid back in the next 60 months, then Dr. Whitman has to pay the remainder of the special back, and he can collect it then for the future going forward.
Alderman Hayes.
And Dr. Whitman, he's been giving all along as far as, he's willing to deed over that easement so it's part of the city. That way it gives police, patrol, fire, they already have access for emergencies, but then it gets patrolled more efficiently with the Minot Police Department, because technically that's going through the county. They should go on the bypass all the way around through up into the development there. So Dr. Whitman's been more than forgiving. I think we ought to give him an opportunity to speak to, to the specials. It's his dime. And then we still would have to, as a city council and Dr. Whitman, go through the platting or the deeding process, quit claim it over to the city, so it was part of city property and not in the county. But I think we ought to give Dr. Whitman an opportunity to answer a few questions if anyone has them.
Okay, before we, did you make a motion, Alderman Fuller? Okay.
Just talking in general.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, I mean, I'm agreeable to that. Certainly, if we want to hear from the property owner, that's fine. Come on forward.
Hello, my name is Mark Whitman. I'm the owner of the land that we've been discussing here. As far as Sunset Boulevard goes, originally this was, I was requested to give an easement for that section that extends from 19th Avenue to 21st Avenue, to provide emergency vehicles, a route to fire vehicles that were stationed, the equipment was stationed at the airport, and it would cover the northwest corner of Minot, because the other fire station apparently down by the library was being closed and moved to the south side. Originally, when the easement went in, that was put in by the city, traffic was actually fairly busy even from its inception. And as discussed, when Eagles Landing went in, traffic was bigger, much more, had increased quite a bit. The store at 16th, the grocery store at 16th and 21st added to the traffic. And then, of course, the high school now being in place, there's considerable traffic on that road. That road is put in by the city. It's the city's road, doesn't really go anywhere that I want to go. I appreciate the idea of the special assessments, but I'm not convinced that I want to take that risk. If I were simply to borrow the money to improve Sunset, then I would have to pay that back from whatever lots I sold along Sunset. And the problem would be if I don't sell any, then I'm in a bad financial situation that I don't really want to be in at this point in my life. Actually, the special assessment idea is the same thing. If everything sells, it's good. If it doesn't sell, that's and I have actually been in a situation like that before, and it's not good. So I would request that the city, since it is basically the city's road to start with, do the improvements, and then I think they can probably, if as we hope, commercial development will occur along the road, the sales tax and the property taxes that they paid would repay the city for that road. There's a lot of people that benefit from having that road other than me. First off would be all the people that are driving on that road every day. They don't have to have the ruts, they don't have to have the washboarding, they could have city lights. It would be a lot better road for them. Second benefit would be any pedestrians. As it is right now, if you want to walk from 19th Avenue to 21st Avenue, you either have to walk on that gravel road or cross-country. In addition, I don't know whether I want to bring this up, but I had the property for sale more than 10 years ago. I had it sold, development was going to go in, everything was set, and then that all fell apart. I just took the property off the market because I don't think anybody wanted to attempt to do anything with it after that. 2 years ago, we put it back on the market, and we have not really had any offers. I don't know whether it's because the property's been tainted by past development efforts or not, but it's possible. And so I think if it's going to be developed, I'm going to do it, I'm going to have a lot of help from the city. Otherwise, we'll just have to wait to see if someone else will come in that has a lot deeper pockets than I do. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for property owner, Doctor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sir. Further discussion? Alderman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think if I look back over a number of years, there are a couple of repeat questions or comments that people bring up over and over and over and over again. And one of them certainly is to have Sunset Boulevard paved. They don't understand why it's not. We try to explain it. I think that entire quadrant of Minot would appreciate having that street paved. It gets used on a regular basis. I don't know if we do any traffic studies, but even living in a different end of town, I know how much I've accessed that. So I think people that live in the area certainly would want to see it done. It is a different concept for us to pay for it instead of a developer. But I would be amenable to looking at some sort of funding method to make it happen, because I think that our residents have been asking for it, and I think that the comments are correct, that if that street gets paved, it will spur on more development in the area. It'll make it more interesting, more appealing to business owners who would be willing to open new businesses in Minot.
Alderman Fuller.
Thank you. And I guess I know Dr. Whitman was up here. Have you talked at length with anybody about the cost? Because after I sat in on the DRT meeting with you guys just to hear it out, and I saw the $1.8 million number, I called the two paving companies, or two of the three paving companies in town, and asked them what a quarter-mile road with a 6-inch lift and curb and gutter would cost. And they both told me between $800,000 and $900,000 with maybe $100,000 of engineering fees. So I'm wondering how your engineering firm got to 1.8 million instead of where the paving companies are, because, I mean, if we cut that in half, is that something more that you're more amenable to do with the special assessments instead of at 1.8 million? Because I don't think any of us up here want to pay for it on the city's dime. I mean, the developer doesn't want to pay for it. The citizens around there don't want special assessments to pay for it. They want everybody else in the city to pay for it. And I'm not sure, you know, at $1.8 million that the citizens of Minot want to pay for that, so.
Alderman Hayes.
Yeah, the problem with the estimates on that, anytime you say government, the price goes up 30% or more. That's where the high price, whenever you have an engineer's cost analysis, they get paid by the price. So the higher it is, the more they make. That's what drives the price of that. For the city to go in and do specials on the property would be great, but discounted, it still has to be put out. If it's public money on specials, it still has to be put out to public bid. Therefore, you're still going to get those. You don't get the, I could go in and pave that for $1 million, have it all done, but if I put it out to bid through the city, they're going to pay the 1.8 to $2 million.
Alderman Pittner.
Dave, if we were to enter into something tonight, let's just say we made a motion like is laid out in this, can we shift funding sources? Will this come back before the council, before there would be another approval? Will there be another step in this?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pittner, you would have to, we'd have to appropriate the funding once we identified the funding source. So we would have to come through and either include it in the next upcoming budget or via budget amendment to appropriate the funds.
Well, then, with that, I'll make a motion to move that the city work with Dr. Whitman and their consulting engineers to pave Sunset Boulevard, at this point utilizing sales tax infrastructure dollars, with the required right-of-way being donated to the city.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Alderman Pittner.
Yeah, again, for a lot of the reasons that have been said, I think it's something worth looking at. We've done something to this effect before, right? Not necessarily at the request of the property owner, but you look at Circle K gas station that's going in right now. You know, when it was stated that this is a multi-million-dollar business that's investing in our community with no tax incentives, with no requests. Well, that's because everything was done. They had nothing to request. All the improvements were done. The roads were put in. The improvements were made. To me, this is somewhat similar to that process, right? Maybe cart before the horse. This is a nuanced situation, but I think this is one of those instances where if the city is willing to make an investment into essentially our road, we maintain it. We requested it. This lends itself to not only improving that corridor of Minot, but lends itself to further development within the city. So I'll be supportive of it. We'll get another crack at it when we bring back with funding sources and when the details, but right now at this point, it seems like a lot of conjecture. We don't know what we don't know. So I'll make a motion, or I've made the motion. I will vote in favor of it.
Alderman Blessum.
Thank you. I guess I'm a little perplexed. I mean, that we do need a step to move us forward so we can get to a vote, and that's a good thing. I can't see voting for this. It just doesn't make any sense. I think, everybody I think knows I'm not a fan of specials. I could maybe get my mind here with a special. It's a commercial area. The people that would be purchasing or working on it would certainly understand that and know what they're buying when they buy it. And we'd be able to work our way through that. We would need some of the clawbacks or whatever that we would need. With that off the table, I just don't see how we do it. I mean, if that means that we've got to close the road because we're not doing right by the landowner, I'm all for that discussion. I think we should have it. But wow, we just watched a presentation where we've got a bridge that's literally falling apart. If we've got $1.8 million to use, we might want to fix the bridge. I mean, to me, that's pretty clear right now. We've heard two sides of this. We heard the risk side from the property owner, and I think we all feel that. You know, I think we would all have that same perspective. We have Alderman Hayes, you know, thinking, man, we just get it done, it's going to blow up. It's going to fill up in a heartbeat. That thinking says to me, this pencils out without the city funding, right? I mean, if that's what it takes, if it takes that kind of investment, so I understand both sides. I'm not saying that either one of them is completely right or valid, but both sides matter in this case, right? I don't know. If we head down this path, where is the next one? And they're going to come one after another. Please put my road in, because if you do, it's going to blow up and we're going to build there. So we just haven't been there. I appreciate what you're saying, Paul. I hadn't thought of it that way. It does make sense that if we have that in place. Here's what I would say. I have the picture up on my screen right now that I'm looking at. I've got 21st coming across the north, and I've got Sunset coming north to south. As I look at that, the city needs to take care of 21st. That's the infrastructure investment we need to make in this area. We just turned that into one of the more strongly used streets in this entire community. We need to get that up in shape. That infrastructure cost is coming soon. We've got other agenda items we're going to continue talking about further east on 21st. Everything from the bypass to the high school needs to be in shape here. We've got to get that going. I can't see spending this money on the city side. Like, if we've got to be the bank on the specials, I could maybe get my mind there. But man, just footing the bill, I can't see it.
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Fuller.
Thank you. Two things. I'll get behind Mike on this. The number of requests, if we go ahead and start doing this policy and change this, the number of requests we will get is going to be ungodly. And everybody will expect us to pave their roads and pay for it. And I mean, we just got done with a budget cycle where we were tight as nails, right? We have no room, no budget, no extra left over. We're worried about spending funding out of our reserves. And here we are talking about fully financing a $1.8 million road. Now, did the city mess up on this as a whole 10 years ago when Walmart was coming to town? Absolutely we did, as a group. But I'm not necessarily thinking that everybody in the city should be paying for this, letting the developer off the hook. I mean, the developers are the ones who pay for the infrastructure, because in the end, they're the ones that get all the money. And I know sales tax will come and it'll help us. Granted, I understand it. But if you aren't willing to take the risk, Dr. Whitman, why should we? You know, I mean, I'm just, and I'm not being sarcastic in any way. I'm just asking for the people. If you don't want to take that risk, why would everybody else in Minot want to take it? And to my colleague's comment about, yeah, that's the way it is, the government, I think that needs to end. I think the overbids and the high bids, because we are the government, has to end. That's a bunch of crap. Excuse me.
Please come to the mic.
I honestly believe that Sunset Boulevard there is going to have to be improved whether I develop there or not. And if I'm on the hook for millions of dollars, I'm not. Sorry. I really don't have anything else to say.
Alderman Hayes.
I have to appreciate what Alderman Blessum had said about 21st needing to be improved. If you've ever driven up in that area when not even when the school's getting in or out, it's busy all the time at that, from 16th to the bypass is nonstop traffic. When they improve 21st, put a roundabout there at the intersection of Sunset Boulevard and Landmark and 21st, that will come, maybe even this budget cycle, I don't know. But at some point, Dr. Whitman's right, Sunset Boulevard's going to have to be improved. You have too many kids coming from that development there. You have too much traffic. It's not like it was 5 years ago. I know for a fact that there's at least 100+ new residents just to the north of that use that same intersection there. You know, I got a comment from a citizen about the dust. Well, if it's paved, and they were against funding it. If it's paved, there's no dust. The kids racing up and down there, that's going to be whether it's paved or a gravel road. The city currently is spending, I don't know how much, on road graders every week. Water trucks are supposed to keep the dust down. on that road and have since 2008. So we're 17 years of maintaining a gravel road that will continue.
Okay, we have Alderman Pittner's motion, and who was the second on that?
Alderwoman Olson.
Alderwoman Olson, okay. So, you want to read back the motion, City Clerk, so we know what?
To move the city staff to work with the landowner to pave Sunset Boulevard using sales tax infrastructure dollars with required right-of-way being dedicated to the city.
Okay. Everybody understand the motion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote.
Motion passed 4-3 with dissent from Blessam, Fuller, and Samuelson.
Okay, that completes item 8.3. We will move on to item 8.4. This is 21st Avenue Northwest Lane Configuration Study and recommendation from the traffic engineer that we reconfigure those lane designations as that chunk of roadway is reworked. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded on the recommendation, discussion. Alderman Blessam.
Just one quick question. And Lance, we had talked about this real quick, and I just wanted to clarify one thing. If we go forward, I'm particularly focused on the parking part of it from 8th to Broadway. If we go forward with that, do we do some kind of notice to the property owners or anything like that, or do we need to in a case like this?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessam, we don't need to. In past practice, what we've done is we've sent letters to the adjacent property owners telling them that either the city has passed an ordinance or will pass an ordinance that's going to restrict parking on a certain street, and that usually suffices.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Okay. Further discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote.
The motion passed unanimously.
That brings us to item 8.5. This is this item is here because it was identified at a past meeting that it be brought back today. However, the recommendation before us is that we table this item until January 20th, insofar as as Chief Fry is unable to be here tonight, nor is City Manager Joyce. So what are the wishes of the council?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Alderman Hayes. Any discussion?
I just had one
Alderman
quick question.
Pittner.
I believe Alderman Blessam was going to attach some proposed amendments to this. I don't know if it missed the agenda or.
No, actually, that's a good point. And I will prepare them for the 20th. The one thing I want to be very careful about, because I've thought about this since, the amendments that I'm proposing will obviously soften the policy and make it much more stringent. But I want to be very careful that the first question before us is whether we turn this on or not. And so for me, for everybody to have those is a crutch to make that too easy in my mind. And so I'm just being honest, Paul.
And I
I'm
just
going
wanted
to
to
hold
make
back.
sure-
I appreciate that. I
make sure
thank
I
you.
didn't miss that.
I'm going to actually purposely hold back on that because we need to make that decision in and of itself, and then we'll talk policy. Thanks.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions? Sir? So, okay, sir, so this isn't a public hearing on this issue. And we're actually going to have it come back. So if you want to speak to us tonight, you can certainly do that during public appearances, which is coming up. And to do that, you fill out a speaker's card on the table there. And would be more than happy to hear from you at that time, okay? Okay, yep. All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and vote on the item. It's not public appearances yet. Okay, that item will be back on the agenda on January 20th. Next up is item number 8.6, which is the alcohol beverage license renewal for Base Camp Indian Kitchen. Council, is there a motion?
Move approval.
Moved by Alderman Pittner,
Second.
seconded by Alderman Olson. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote.
The motion passed unanimously.
That moves us to item 8.7 on the agenda, which is the alcohol licensing for EB Seat Pub LLC. This is a transfer of the retail liquor license for Ebenezer's Eatery and Irish Pub. What are your wishes?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Alderman Olson, second by Alderman Fuller. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and cast our votes.
The motion passed unanimously.
That brings us to item number 9 on the agenda, which is personal appearances. The rules from the state of North Dakota about personal appearances are that to speak to the council, you are required to fill out a speaker's card. Those are available on the table up front, and you're required to give us your name, your address, and the address will be held confidential, and the topic that you intend to speak on. And when you give those to the city clerk, then we will call up those who have desired to speak. Each individual speaker will be allotted 5 minutes or less, your choice. The individual will be notified when their 5 minutes have expired, and the 5-minute time limit may be extended by a majority vote of the city council. All comments must address the topic identified on the speaker card. They must be pertinent to City of Minot and fall under authority of the city council, and they must be directed to the council as a whole. Comments may not be defamatory, abusive, harassing, or unlawful. They may not include information that is exempt or confidential under North Dakota open records law, and they may not interfere with the orderly conduct of the meetings. Individuals not have access to the city's audio and visual technology unless submitted prior and approved, and individuals may not yield their allotted time to another individual. So we will proceed then with public appearances, and the first speaker is Jessica Klein, who's going to speak about the alcohol ordinance.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Jessica Klein. I'm here on behalf of my client, Marketplace Foods, to speak regarding the proposed amendment creating the separate off-sale liquor license. Obviously, you guys voted on that earlier this evening, but I'd like to just add some points. My client's not opposed to thoughtful modernization of the ordinance. However, as proposed, the ordinance creates a significant inequity for the existing license holders, particularly stores that sell alcohol strictly for off-sale and do not operate bars or have on-site consumption. We understand a stated goal is to make our community more open for business and as such attractive to large format retailers such as a Costco or a Sam's Club. While economic development's important, it shouldn't come at the expense of businesses that have already invested heavily in compliance. It's important to consider whether the concern is supported by the city's own experience. Under the prior ordinance, both Target and Walmart purchased liquor licenses, and they complied with the same requirements that my clients did. The licensing framework didn't deter them from locating a liquor store in conjunction with their retail operation here. And that suggests that the idea similar requirements would deter a Costco or Sam's Club is misplaced. Under the ordinance in place at the time, Marketplace was required to obtain a full liquor license simply to sell alcohol off sale. They complied in good faith and invested over $500,000 in 4 separate licenses, relying on the city's regulatory framework. The proposed ordinance would now allow new entrants to sell off-sale liquor with no issuance fee and a proposed initial and annual fee of $3,250, granting the same privilege without the substantial upfront investment existing businesses were required to make. The approach contrasts sharply with the comparable communities. As Attorney Stahlheim mentioned and we talked about earlier today, Grand Forks charges an issuance fee for an off-sale license of $42,560 with a $3,895 annual renewal. In Grand Forks, they allow people that are buying an off-sale license to span that out over 4 years, but they require a bond so that the city would be insured to get that money and get those proceeds even if the business failed. Fargo charges a $90,000 issuance fee, and they have a $1,400 annual renewal. Those cities recognize the value of off-sale licenses up front. Marketplace did not purchase the licenses for a competitive advantage. They did so because it was the only lawful way for them to operate. They don't run a bar, they don't allow for on-site consumption, yet their investment would be effectively devalued under the proposal. This is not in opposition to growth, it's a matter of fairness, reliance, and consistency. We respectfully ask that the council either consider maintaining the current off-sale licensing requirements, or if a separate license is adopted, require an issuance fee that's commensurate with comparable communities and reflective of the privilege of being granted. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
All right, thank you. Next speaker is Deborah Hofarth, and she is also talking about alcohol ordinance.
Good evening, Mayor Janser and the City Council. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. Also thanks for the hard work that's been done in these alcohol ordinances. So far, I know it's been a multi-year project. As you know, I represent the Magic City Retail Beverage Association, and I just want to highlight kind of 3 issues or comments from my group. Enforcement of liquor license designations. A main concern of my group is liquor license enforcement of these different designations. There's compliance checks already by the police department on age and your premise map, right? There's also fire and building that do different inspections as well. It is a concern from my group that a entity operating within a specified licensed category also needs some enforcement. And that's particularly, I think, obvious from my group's perspective in the special events per special event area, which I think is in, I don't remember which section of the ordinances it is. And just an example, supper clubs are often transfer licenses, just like retail liquor license holders. Supper clubs have a requirement for a full kitchen that operates until 1 hour prior to the stopping of distributing and consumption of alcohol on the premises. So if a supper club would transfer their license for a wedding and its kitchen closes at 10, it begs the question how they're able to do that and sell alcohol till 1 if their primary kitchen is on their premise license site closes at 10. As that would be a violation of its liquor license. So those are the kinds of enforcement issues I think is an example of those concerns. The alcohol committee, I don't know what the plan is for that going forward. My client would suggest that continue and meet not, a few times a year, right? And maybe they can talk about these sort of enforcement issues. They would suggest two members from the retail liquor license holders, maybe someone from the supper clubs, or whatever designation that the council would have. Again, we thank you for the hard work so far. Thank you very much.
Very well, thank you. Our next speaker is Dylan Helms, and he is to speak about the ALPLS Policy 433, and he says, that's you, sir? Okay.
Yep.
And he said if it's tabled, you won't talk, but you're welcome to talk.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to encourage the entablement, and thank you for I've sent every city council member my half-baked ideas on it, and thank you for at least giving it some more debate and more consideration. Have a good day.
Thank you. Next speaker is Melissa Ferris, and she will be speaking about the acts on LPRS and the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights and Civil Liberties.
This is a scream coming up here without notes and speaking spontaneously again, but apparently there's been a number of U.S. Supreme Court rulings against metadata collection from earlier ones prior to when the private companies started setting them up to current ones. Just a quick Google here from the AI's got Riley versus California, Smith v. Obama, other things against bulk data that were formerly by the government, but on every round, this seems to violate a lot of established constitutional laws and our Bill of Rights. Basically, that we do have a right to privacy. The metadata counts as an invasion of it that should require a warrant at the very least, and the idea that it's in the hands of private corporations is just a nightmare. From what I was able to dig up as far as videos that I've been referring on to people for reference, we found out that these things are extremely hackable. Everybody, even former police officers, are interviewing people who've hacked these cameras. There's like zero protection. Not to mention the companies themselves are able to use and process this data without a warrant and to sell it. They don't have any restrictions as far as law enforcement or other things that seem to set on here. And I don't know what your amendments are going to be, Mr. Blessum, whether or not they'd be strong enough to protect us from these companies misusing or selling our data. But apparently it's a workaround for the warrant thing to where private companies can go ahead and sell a person's private data. And there's no requirement or protection in privacy unless it's already written into law. Basically, from what I understand, the police can read every text message in my phone, but they need a warrant to see what I'm checking out in the library. Old versus new. Apparently, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that our phones go by radio message, so there's very little. And while it tracks us down to the step, we do have the right to not have our phones on hand or to turn them off or put them in a Faraday bag, but not so much the cameras that are put up in public. And let's face it, that old car commercial goes, it's not just your car, it's your freedom. As far as our vehicles go, to just have them parked out on the street for any of our business and to have them scanned and recorded by anybody with a plate scanner or a flock camera is sort of a privacy and a security nightmare. One of the people that hacked these cameras basically mentioned the fact that not only were they available for creepers and stalkers like John Klug, who managed to turn up at the hotel where his ex-wife was, but they are available for people to watch kids doing private things like playing on the playground. There's a YouTube video of the lady whose name I should have wrote down because she was accused of being a porch pirate or stealing a package, and the cop that accused her said she couldn't, quote unquote, go out for a breath of fresh air without it being recorded on their flock cameras. The lady in return had her own recordings in her vehicle because she worked for a bank or a financial firm, and basically she had to take her own video to prove her innocence and get the charges dropped because she clearly was not the blonde woman in the video that stole the package. It's just one thing after another where this stuff's being misused. To me, the biggest problem is the fact that law enforcement, under the doctrine of qualified immunity, has no legal obligation to use the already existing tools to solve crimes or to protect anyone other than their immediate supervisors. You go into the history of qualified immunity, and it's one heinous crime after another where the survivors are told that they are not entitled to any protection under the law regarding the police force, social services, our letter agencies like the FBI. There's accounts, I want to go ahead and see if I can get the video up eventually, where Thomas Massey brings, either Thomas Massey or Marjorie Taylor Greene bring on a survivor of the Epstein sex trafficking ring, and she says that she and her sister called the FBI to protect themselves and other people who were being exploited, and the FBI just hung up on them. And, I mean, you picture that the old methods that would have protected so many people are not being used. Why are we spending more money on these toys which seem to constitute a privacy invasion instead of just requiring the law enforcement and other government employees to perform duties as the public is being told that they're obligated to? I mean, it's false advertising to try to say that somebody is protecting the public when they have no legal obligation to protect the public. It's just that simple and that horrible. I mean, we ought to be able to, why invest in these new tools?
Ma'am, your time has expired.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Okay, I have, okay, yep. Yeah.
My name's Edana Kitzman. I'm from Minot, and I think it's kind of odd. A criminal can take a picture of my license plate and flash it to all their friends and do what they want. But a police officer better not do that and hold on to it for 30 days. I think it's a little odd, and I know abductions of children, they don't take just 30 days to find if they're still alive. So I understand the restriction of 30 days. They're being cooperative, really, but they're also being limited if they aren't allowed the same facility as a criminal. There's more of them than there are cops and private citizens, I think. So, and I don't know, I think it's a little odd if we are afraid of government officials having our information, yet we're going to pay taxes, and Social Security has my information. I don't mind. I get a check now, you know, and it's to my right address and everything. And they've got all kinds of information that I can use from them to vouch for me, not just for some criminal to hack in and say, well, whatever they try to do. There are so many safeguards against, what do they call it, cybersecurity now that doesn't let people get in. And I think they're finding out that most problems cybersecurity find out, you can't get in, but it's within the company that's having a problem, and it's really easy to locate them. But if they did not have cybersecurity to trace back and do their footwork, things wouldn't get solved. And that's the same thing with the police department or anybody having that license plate reader. They would locate a car with a license plate faster than my cell phone laying in a ditch if I was abducted. I mean, I'm obviously not going to be there. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That concludes public appearances for tonight, and we'll move on to miscellaneous and discussion items. And item 10.1 is the Visit Minot Annual Report. Stephanie, good evening.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Shainrock, and I get to work at Visit Minot every day. And I think I have, there we go, thank you. Am I supposed to use this to push that ahead? Anyone know? Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
it should work.
Cool, cool. So tonight I'm here to tell you about the 2025 performance report that Visit Minot, I guess we've been working on for the past year. I have submitted a written report, and that's what's in your packet. Tonight I'm not going to talk about all of that. The written report answers our agreement, those deliverables, those fulfilled obligations that we're required to do. But tonight I'm going to talk more about the data that that we make decisions on, I guess, and so that's what I'm going to share tonight. A couple quick thanks. One is Tom Joyce allowed us to delay our reporting until now. We were prepared to go a month ago, but we didn't have we wanted to show the data at least through November, and I had a great conversation with the Department of Commerce this morning that shows some data through December that I'm actually going to be sharing with you. And then also, the last time I was here, or one of the last times I was here, we had talked about, or we implemented that leisure fee in April. I'm not going to really go down that rabbit hole tonight. I just wanted to say thank you to city staff, of course, Tom Joyce, Dave Lakefield, Stephanie Stahlheim, and Jeannie, and among others that have been really helpful in that entire implementation process. So just wanted to say thanks for that. Okay, so jumping right in, I'm going to talk just really briefly about our tourism model. Most of you have seen this before, but it's a good recap because there's been a lot of discussion tonight. So this, in a nutshell, gives us a visual that talks about what we do and why we do it. So at the top of the funnel, you see all kinds of humans. The goal is getting more humans essentially into Ward County. And while we want them here because we are friendly people, we also want them here because of the money that they bring in that visitor economy that we will be jumping into because that is so important to our economy. So they come into Minot, the bottom of that funnel, and they're here for, under Visit Minot, we have 3 segments we watch: leisure tourism, sports tourism, and then meetings and conventions. From that funding, if you go off to the right, you see hotel tax, and that is primarily how Visit Minot is funded, which of course means our job is to get more humans into Ward County. On the left side, you see, of course, money coming into Minot, and that money goes to our restaurants, our events, our retail. And of course, our philosophy on that is when those businesses are more successful and making more money, they grow, which in turn, again, brings more humans into Minot. So today we're going to talk about tourism in 2025, and I, as most of you know, I'm a very transparent person. And so I have to say that of the 6 years that I've worked here, this is, I don't know that I'll say least favorite, but that might be the word, year to stand up here, and that's because tourism is down, and that doesn't taste good when you are a marketer. So what I can tell you is this, tourism is down in the United States. Tourism is down in North Dakota. And tourism is down in Minot slightly. As you know, we subscribe to Datafy. That is our data provider. And so what you see here is the monthly volume by visitor days. For the most part, it's comparable, right? When you look at, and this is the number that I got from the state today, which does align with our data. They have a different data provider than we do. And what I really appreciate about that is their data is aligning with ours, which is always nice to hear or to see that it's consistent. So the state as a whole saw a 6.5% reduction for the entire year. Minot saw a 6.7 reduction in the overall visits for the year. The top markets in North Dakota, and this is the thing that's really interesting. Like I said, I had this conversation just a few hours ago. The 5 top markets in North Dakota shows a reduction of a range that goes from 3% to 17%. Out of the 5 markets, Minot ranked 2 in, so it goes 3%, 6.7%, then it goes up from there. While I'm happy we're ranked 2, we have expectations that we're here for a reason, and that is to bring more humans into Ward County, and so I can tell you that is not lost on us, regardless of what the trends are like in the state. A visitor, when they say, what's a visitor? A visitor is a person that lives 50 miles away, more than 50 miles away, and has spent 4 hours in Minot. I tell you that because I think it's really important to know that these aren't people just traveling through on Highway 2, filling some gas and moving on, right? They've been here for 4 hours. The other thing we exclude from the data is people that have been in Minot longer than 5 days. We get a lot of people here that are visiting family, some for military, some for not, and we truly want to exclude them from visitors just because we don't want it to skew our data. So when we're talking about data, that's kind of our the standard, I'll say. So I shared this visual simply because it's a good visual. Again, we exclude anybody within a 50-mile radius of Minot. This can kind of show you, like we talk about heads and beds. Traditionally, that's been very important for tourism to follow. That's what they've always followed. A few years ago, Visit Minot, the board of directors and staff took a different approach and said heads and beds are very important. You know what's equally important? Is feet in the street. Not because that's how we're funded, but because that essentially equates to our visitor economy. As we've said many, many times, and I appreciate the stance that this council and city leadership and the board have taken in that tourism is economic development, and that's what you're going to see here, what we're talking about. Here's the top 5 counties that have for credit card spend in Ward County. And for those of you that are numbers people, the chart on the right represents a number that we look at all the time that's kind of really been similar the past few years, saying that 70% of credit card spend comes from Ward County, 30% comes from outside of Ward County. That's been really consistent. Now, when you looked at the left-hand chart where it says spending by county, I just want to point out that share in spending by county excludes spending from within 50 miles of Minot. So when you see Williams County at 26%, that is of the 30%. I just want to make sure I make that clear. As you can see, we've got some decreases here. What I can tell you, and I'll dive into that in just a little bit, but what I can tell you is we monitor each of these counties and whether they're up or down, and then we adjust our marketing plan to go after them because we don't want to see anybody in the red. That's how we move the needle. The one thing, I got this from the state, and this is the first time I got this, I got it today. I found this fascinating. They have, I think, from their data provider, I think she said told me 80 categories. And this is what I found. She sent me some of them for retail categories. So when I asked her, I said, we're interested to know what the visitor economy looks like to some of these businesses. So, clothing store, sporting goods store, shoe store, and cosmetic store. Each one of those categories all have over 40% of their credit card spend comes from people outside of 50 miles. Restaurants and discount stores are at 31%, and fast food is a separate segment. It's actually under that. But restaurants that aren't fast food comes in at 31%. Like I said, I just found out that today, and we plan to use that for our advantage moving forward. Keeping along the trend of, spend, we pulled out Williams County intentionally. And this goes only through October 2025. Our data, especially spending data, is usually about 2 months behind, which is part of the reason why I wanted to wait until tonight. So this is one, I show this as simply an example of what we watch. Williams County, as I already showed you, that's our number 1 county, but it isn't something that, the last year we're down almost 2%. But this is the thing that I want to focus on and motivate us to step up our game just a little bit more. And that is, a few years ago, we adjusted our marketing to really focus on the people and the value of those customers that are coming in, and then we adjust our marketing to get them to come here either more often or spend more time here when they're here. This county is a good example of one where that historically, where we've seen good movement in the past few years. Again, in a year from now, I hope to tell you, I had better show you a different trend line for 2026. But I point that out specifically because, like I said, we look at every one of these counties, right? This isn't just one thing we're looking at. We're looking at every single one of those to figure out what we can do differently. Let's talk about Canada. So the other thing that's not as fun to talk about is Canada. This shows, at the beginning of 2025, we were ranked not much above, we were number 2, and then that's fluctuated throughout the year. The state reports a 25% reduction in Canadian traffic, and Minot reports about a 20% reduction in Canadian traffic for the year. That's impacted by a few different things. I honestly would expect Minot to perform better than the rest of the state. Like we should, right? So that's where that expectation lies. But I want to talk, when we're talking about Canadians, this obviously just shows Canadian border crossings for personal vehicles, and you can see the ports that we specifically monitor. There's a few things that there's a lot of things we monitor when it comes to Canadians. The reality is when it comes to our data, we do not get clean data from Canadians. We track their web traffic, that's clean. We monitor our socials. We talk to different hotels that cater to more Canadians, see what their traffic is like. We look at events, ticketed events, and see what that is like. I can tell you that the North Dakota State Canadians love the North Dakota State Fair. And that's because they've got big entertainment, and Canada hasn't been able to compete with those prices. And so we're fortunate in that the State Fair has been the number one driver for Canadians. So when we talk about the different segments, and I mentioned before leisure tourism. I'll talk about all three. So this shows our web traffic, and I show that I want to give a little disclaimer here. Typically, when we show data, we always show data from the vendor because I don't want it to look like we're modifying anything ever, right? This is modified. Under active users, it's 169,000. In March last year, we had about 25,638 users coming from China. So we cut those out. So this is a modified graph. And it's because when I say we look at this data with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that when we're looking at it, it is accurate and that it just doesn't feel good. That's the name of the game. So you can see here we've got active users at just about 170,000. I can slice and dice data 1,000 different ways. So if you guys are ever interested in that, you say the word and I will bring you what you need. Once again, in the visitor center, so these are people who came into the visitor center and signed our guest book. By July 1st, we had all 50 states represented. There's the 5 states you see there and 31 countries. Full disclaimer, I'm a North Dakota girl. I'm a Minot girl for 25 plus years. Prior to working at the visitor center, I don't know that I would have believed this, right? And I would like to encourage each of you to stop at the visitor center next summer. There's still people coming in every day, but it's fun to talk to them, and it's really fun to see how many people are, in fact, in our city. The last thing I want to talk about, again, web traffic. Someone else tonight talked about, the things that, how AI has changed things. For those of you who are in marketing or own a business, AI has dramatically changed the way that consumers find your website. And so we have spent the last several months and are continuing to completely adjust the content and the way we write our website for the purposes of catering to that consumer. Because for a while we were seeing, and this I forgot to mention this, our website traffic essentially was flat. Our Canadian traffic was down, our US traffic was slightly up. Essentially it was flat, but we have seen a good uptick towards the end of 2025, and that's because we've adjusted. We can run reports that shows how much traffic comes from just AI. So one more thing. Oh, here we go. This is what I wanted to show you. Okay, so back to leisure tourism. I'm not going to go through all the details on this because I don't want to get completely into the weeds with data. But this is the reason why I want to talk about this. It isn't really about the specific things of data. It's really more about, this is all tied to performance. And I can tell you the Visit Minot team understands our job. And so I give this to you for the sole purpose of saying we are monitoring every iota of this all the time, because I believe how we're going to get this back on track isn't from some big swooping tournament or some big wonderful event that's coming to town. We're working on those too. I believe it's from refining every segment that we work on. The December spike, for those of you that are wondering, well, the North Dakota State Fair announced some girl named Jessie, and she's apparently a big deal. And in the same week, we announced the holiday train was in town, and we had Christmas activities. So if you're wondering what that massive spike in December was, that isn't just one day, it's for a few days. But that is what that's from. The last slide I have tonight is about tournaments. So again, we had an $11 million estimated economic impact for the tournaments in 2025. Full transparency, we had 37 tournaments, great. That's up by 3 tournaments, but our economic impact is down by, I think it's $2.5 million or something like that. What we found is we had more tournaments, but they were smaller. And so we are working with each of those to figure out what we can do to bring them back, to bring that back up. But as like I said, I like transparency, and even when it's not fun to talk about, I think it's important to not have illusions and to talk about the realities of some of our challenges of what we face. Speaking of challenges, the last thing I want to talk about, I did not create a slide for this, and the last thing I want to talk about is conventions, which, again, I will tell you, my perception has changed over the last few years. I have full confidence that conventions are a really good opportunity for Minot. As you know, with COVID, then there were no conventions. Well, conventions, there's now conventions, and I would be remiss if I wasn't honest in saying that there's not a lot of groups in Western North Dakota doing it well. And so I believe firmly that this is an opportunity for Minot. If we had a convention space that was fully staffed, able to take conventions, and large enough to be able to handle most of them. It is one of the challenges that we face at Visit Minot. We've had extensive conversations with our board of directors and some of our stakeholders, and I anticipate a lot more conversation in the next few months to help turn this around. So that is my report for 2025. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Alderman Olson.
Yeah, thank you. 2 questions, kind of unrelated. The first one is, I sit on an international committee of educators, and I have monthly conversations with Canadians. The Canadians aren't coming because they're dissatisfied with what is being offered in the U.S. They're, in opposition to what is being said out of the White House. And so until that changes, I don't know if they'll come back unless you have heard something different. So I don't know if you have regular conversations with Canadians. How does that go?
Thank you, Alderwoman Olson. Yes, Mayor Janser, to answer that question, and you had a second part to that question. You want me to answer this first?
It's a separate question, so go ahead and answer that.
Okay, we talk to Canadians all the time. Last year we went up to two Canadian trade shows. We've been up for those for over 20 years. And this is what I'll say. Just like Americans, there are people there's a whole scale, right? I will say, I forgot to put this I had it in my talking points and forgot to mention it, that, we did see when the headlines are in the headlines about Canada, we saw a dip. There's no way around it. But it took a couple months and we got them back. We have a database of emails from Canadians that we've worked incredibly hard to gain. It is probably, it's a huge asset that Visit Minot has, and it's a marketing tool that we use to our advantage. From that, we were able to see exactly when people clicked through, when people started being interested, when people were not. I was getting love letters from Canadians, and that has reduced. We still get them. We still respond to every single one of them. I will say we are getting Canadians. We just had some Canadians in our visitor center today. Good. And had a wonderful conversation with them. We are getting them, and it is a 20% reduction. In every media interview I've done, and I have another one scheduled for tomorrow with a Canadian media outlet, I say this, that yes, we are down, but it's not as far down as what some entities would like to believe. Does that 20% hurt? It does. You know what? We were 100% down when COVID was shut down. And we've worked very, very hard, and we have seen good impacts from working hard to keep it at just 20%. We have a very long-standing relationships with Canada, and those are open lines of communication. So I believe that relationship over decades has helped.
Well, I appreciate that. That's good. So my second question, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay. Do you anticipate increased traffic with the Presidential Library opening next year and the 250th anniversary? Do you see some of that correlation being impactful in Minot?
I thank you for that question, Alderman Olson. Yes, I do. I can tell you that, you know, we started a relationship with Medora, I think this was 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. And they have a new marketing director, but we started this relationship with them. We have ND Road Trip, and Visit Minot owns ndroadtrip.com, and it goes from the Peace Gardens through Minot to Medora or vice versa. And so we have a good relationship with Medora and plan to capitalize on that. Fortunately, we have great leadership in tourism at the state, and so everybody is really working together on that. I don't know, I'm hesitant to say this, I don't know the impact of the 250th anniversary. I'm kind of a stick in the mud sometimes, and I will say, you know, I don't know how that's going to truly impact tourism. I hope it's wonderful. I absolutely hope it's wonderful. We're talking to it because, you know what, there's some people that it means something to. And, you know, one thing I mentioned this evening was talking about segmentation. And I am a firm believer that the secret to getting our marketing plan back on track, not marketing plan back on track, our marketing plan is on track. What I'm going to say is in order to get our marketing working that much harder for us, I believe segmentation is the answer. And that means the people who care a whole lot about the 250th anniversary, we're speaking to them. And the people who care a whole lot about camping in North Dakota, we're speaking to them. And on down the line. It takes an incredible amount of manpower to be able to speak to each of those. You know, in the olden days, when I grew up in marketing, and it was a whole lot easier to just go throw $300,000-$400,000 at media. Right? It was a whole lot easier. You just said, hey, let me push out this message and people will come. Well, that doesn't work any longer. And now it's all about segmentation and manpower and speaking to each of those audiences in a meaningful way and creating content that means something to them.
Thank you.
Any other questions for? Okay. Stephanie, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 10.2, which is the Economic Development Plan Review Committee report. This is a report that we have had in our hands for a while, and it was I think tabled for a short while, and it is back before us tonight. So this is a discussion of the results of that report. And I think Alderman Blessum, you are the chair of this, I think, and Alderman Pittner was also a member of this group. And I think I know we have some folks who served on that in the audience tonight as well. So maybe I'll just turn it over to you, Alderman Blessum, and you can sort of kick off some whatever discussion we want to have here.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, we've been over this a little bit in the past, but one of the steps that we still wanted to do was, number one, to give the members of the committee an opportunity to come and address us. We've got a couple of them here tonight, so I'm glad to see that. And then I think beyond that, we've got a set of primary recommendations that I think we want to step through and determine whether there are additional steps that we do want to take as a council, because that's really what the intent of the committee was to study the different programs and the different methods that we're using for economic development, and then determine whether there were any adjustments to those programs that we want to make. And I guess I'm pleased so far with what we've already done. We've taken a couple steps and we've done a couple things off the list, and I think we've got some more opportunities. So from there, Mr. Mayor, if I could, I'd like to invite any of the members that are here. I know Jordan is here. I see Tyler is here. I think Beth was here, but I think she had to step out. And we do have some notes from Beth that I'll read to make sure those are heard. But Jordan, Tyler, if either of you would like to come and talk to the council, we'd appreciate it.
Members of the City Council, my name is Jordan Nelson, resident of Minot, and I believe that we are about the only thing left standing between you and dinner, so I'll try to keep this brief, if you will. Alderman Blessam, first off, I want to thank you for the invitation to be here today. As you said, we do have a report that's in front of you. There was a lot of back and forth for what ultimately came out of that report. If you look, there's a couple pages, and there's a couple of things of substance that came out of it. Just a few thoughts that I had putting together here today, when it comes to economic development and how some of this is put together, and maybe what I've seen in regards to how this all fits ultimately into your budget, which is obviously more complex than I'll probably oversimplify, but there's multiple pots of money, and I get that. I serve on the Magic Fund Screening Committee as well. One thing that really stuck out to me with what was budgeted for 2025, and I know we're in the 2026 budget now, the Magic Fund, as of our last meeting, had 4.11 years of those expenses sitting in the fund, and it's grown by roughly $1 million the year prior to this year. That's an interesting conundrum when it comes to budgeting. Obviously, money is obviously, trying to keep property taxes down, things like that. And then you watch other sources of money increase. Something to obviously be cognizant about. When we look at the Magic Fund, the PACE programs, they're probably the priority. They're the thing that's open to any business person in town. I'm a big believer in your small businesses driving Main Street driving success. It's what I do day in, day out. Those PACE programs, that's taxpayer money through the Bank of North Dakota. Those profits are ours as taxpayers, and to be able to have an avenue for those funds, I think is ultimately important, and I think that was spelled out in the report. Just a thought that I have is just making sure that if those balances in the Magic Fund are swelling, are there opportunities to use that money that provide economic development maybe in more indirect ways? And since we got done with the committee, you guys have taken that on. So, talking about transferring money back and forth. So I can leave that at that. The other thing I tried to bring up, things that help the economy that maybe aren't throwing dollars at things. You talk about property taxes. I think most people, whether it's through the program through the state or whatnot, saw property tax decrease on their primary residence. What's the economic development of that? That's pretty significant. Kudos to you guys. As somebody that owns a house in Minot, that's 2 years in a row the city's brought their portion down. I think that's really good work. And I don't think that, you have rich people in town that own houses, and you have people on fixed incomes that own houses. And everybody gets benefit from that. And I think that's a really encouraging thing to see, probably a really difficult thing to sustain, but it's a good step. The second thing, obviously, is the red tape and regulation. We talk about, can we do things by getting out of the way? I've been here going on 2 hours now, so I got to listen to a few things. I heard about Sunset Boulevard and some of those things. And if you get a big box developer to come into that property, $1.8 million sounds like a lot of money, but you could recoup that really fast too. So obviously there's way more that goes into it than that, but I think there's opportunities there, and from everything that I have heard, the city's taken significant steps to improve things from a red tape regulatory environment perspective, and from what I see, assuming that we're going to continue to see that, and I think that's a really good step, and I think that's something that was also outlined in the report. And the last thing, and this is just maybe something I see as a banker, we talk about how we measure economic development success, and a lot of times the most common method you see is jobs. Well, jobs are great as long as you got somebody to fill them. And, you know, you're talking a 2.2% unemployment rate in the city of Minot. Last figures I saw, I was just updating some information from my bank board. And it's been a while since I had economic classes in college, but that's a shortage, and that's a constraint. Workforce, housing, probably the two most important things towards long-term sustained economic development success as I see it. And yeah, there are all kinds of challenges that come with both of them. You know, it's hard to get people to come to Minot. I made the joke in our meetings, I can't get my family to come to visit me sometimes in Minot because it's a long ways away. I'm hearing your rebuttal to that, and it's making me laugh. Also, you know, you talk about housing. I mean, development, it's tough. Things are expensive. They're getting more expensive. They're not going to get cheaper. You know, if there's creative ways to address those things, you know, I think that's what's going to lead to long-term success for us. I mean, whether if you can find a housing developer to build you 6 houses or build you 60 houses, I mean, we'll take all of them, I would think, because these are the things that are going to draw people to town. And if we can find ways to do it, obviously nobody likes specials. A lot of areas that are growing use them, but they got a lot of downsides too. And if there's ways that we can find that accomplish some of that, but keep the burden down on the city, I think those are things that are really going to be key to really making this thing hum. But with that, that's all I had for things written down. I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be on this committee. Alderman Blessum, Alderman Pittner, thank you for your efforts with all of this. And yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
All right, Tyler, you good? Okay, just observing. Okay, Mr. Mayor, I've got notes from Beth Feldner, who is also a member, that I'll read, just for everybody's got them. I guess I think I'd prefer it if I read them, I guess. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay. So again, this is Beth Feldner, who is a committee member. I appreciate the opportunity to provide feedback this evening, as well as the council's continued willingness to revisit the work of the Economic Development Review Committee and reflect on its role and whether it was effective. The committee's work was primarily focused on a retrospective review. From the beginning, we struggled to find a clearly defined metric to track success or a consistent framework for evaluating economic development outcomes. Economic development is inherently long-term and regional. Evaluating it effectively requires continuity, subject matter understanding, and alignment with a broader strategy. Without those pieces in place, it's easy for the process to drift away from what's really making a difference or to evaluate the real economic impact. So far, it hasn't been clear how this process improves economic outcomes for Minot. What has been clear is that it adds uncertainty for partners and organizations that depend on stability to do their work. Communities that compete well for jobs and investment tend to offer clear expectations, stable funding, and predictable governance. Uncertainty, even when well-intended, can slow progress. I'd encourage the council to focus less on whether certain tools or partnerships align with personal philosophies and more on whether they deliver real results for the community. By results, I mean metrics such as job growth, private investment, workforce, and housing progress. Those are goals the community should clearly define together, along with each entity's role. I want to briefly address some of the programs administered by the city that we spent some time on as a committee. Specifically, the programs that focus on the look and feel of our community, including the Renaissance Zone and the Facade Improvement Project, that improve the look and feel of our community. Some view these investments as benefiting only one area or one group. I see them differently. A healthy downtown and attractive business areas are part of the broader economic ecosystem that supports the entire city. They help attract employers, support small businesses, draw visitors, and make Minot a place where people want to live, work, and spend time. That quality of life component matters when communities are competing for workforce and private investment. When done well, these programs are not only cosmetic or wasteful. They strengthen the business environment, increase activity, and contribute to long-term economic vitality that benefits the whole community. Other cities in our state and region are using state, federal, and local programs to address workforce, housing, and growth. Minot will stay competitive by being a part of those efforts. We prove nothing by sitting them out. From my perspective, the council already receives a strong level of accountability around economic development. The data that's provided, the transparency in reporting, and the results being tracked are appropriate and sufficient for informed decision-making. Adding additional reporting and oversight risks slowing down success without meaningfully improving outcomes. What I believe matters most moving forward is creating stability and confidence for the partners doing this work and for the businesses watching how Minot approaches growth. One suggestion I hope the council considers is multi-year contracts. Longer-term contracts would create budgetary stability for the city and allow funded entities to plan, hire, and focus on delivering results rather than operating year to year. Economic development is a necessary investment for communities that want to grow and move forward. Minot's ability to compete, attract people and employers, and strengthen its tax base depends on clear goals, stable partnerships, and consistent approach. Thank you again for the opportunity to share these thoughts and support a path forward that keeps Minot positioned for long-term success. Again, that was Beth Feldner. Okay, so Mr. Mayor, one of the things I'd like to do next is just step through again the primary recommendations that the committee came up with, because I think, number one, I think there's some very good bullet points here, and number two, I think we can see places where we've already taken some action that's showing that while, yes, there was a very rigorous discussion and a lot of pushing back and forth, that there was a set of outcomes that were healthy for this process, which is really what I was looking for from the beginning, and I think that we got. And so I'll just step through those, and then we can see where the discussion heads from there. So the first was, as Jordan mentioned, the state program matching funds, the PACE and Flex PACE programs, and that was to prioritize the funding of those programs at levels adequate for their operations. And I think, in our most recent budget, we've done that. We've in fact maxed out Souris Basin's funding levels. I believe under ordinance, we can't go any higher. So we've done exactly that to make sure that those are ready and ready to go to work for the people. Continuing the Renaissance Zone program, again, we want to encourage the board to move districts and to make sure that is continually being refreshed, because we want to make sure that if we're going to have a program like that in place, that it's being used in a way that's going to better the city as a whole as much as we can. Number three, continue the builder's property tax exemption and the homeowner's property tax exemption programs. Again, those are ones that we haven't discussed yet, but so far there's been no changes to those programs whatsoever. An additional one was to consider additional residential developer incentives, such as using special assessments, looking at infrastructure improvements, looking at additional developer tax credits and developer rebates. So those are options that the council can take a look at as we go forward. The next bullet is on the facade improvement program. Number one, take a look at a larger look at the areas laid out in the 2040 comprehensive plan, and task the Renaissance Zone Review Committee to make recommendations on where that could be moved. Then the second bullet under that is to change the structure of the program by changing the city or applicant percentages and/or reducing the amount offered per application, and then including a sunset date on the program when it's appropriate. Next, the partnership with MAC EDC and the City of Minot. MAC EDC provides more detail on how the City of Minot funds are spent yearly. That was the motion I made at the last meeting. So they will have a report to us now yearly that will lay out how the funds are made. MAC EDC is just one of the entities that were included in that, and so we've already taken that step as a council. And then also consider the continued investment in data collection and presentation of data, and we had Visit Minot here as well tonight. We've got Brecca here. We've worked together. Alderman Pittner and I were on that committee as well to get a data package put together that is shared across those entities. Because for me, having the data necessary as we're talking to developers or we're talking to entities that are looking to come to town, we've got to have our facts straight. And I think having a comprehensive set of data will be a great step, and we're in the middle of working our way through that. And then lastly, considering establishing a land development partnership committee. That's something that Paul has championed, and I assume we're on our path towards that. We passed a motion to get that moving, and hopefully we'll have that coming soon. So as I mentioned, these were the bullets. These were the primary takeaways from the committee, and something that, I'm proud of the work. I think we had good discussions. As I've said before, part of my role in that was to pull in one direction because, in my opinion, we've pulled awfully hard the other direction for a long time. We've offered a lot of great incentives and a lot of great ways to use public funds to better businesses, to better buildings, to do all of those things. And I do feel that there is a role that the council has to play in holding that accountable and making sure that it's being done in the right way. And I take that seriously. And so I don't make any qualms about that. I pulled very hard the opposite direction. And you'll see that I will continue to, because I think we've got an awful lot of advocates that are pulling in the direction of let's go spend the public money to do this. So I think we do need a couple people that are willing to do that from time to time. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back over for any discussion on the council. Depending upon where things go, I do have one motion that I will bring, but we'll see where people want to go from here.
Okay, we're open for discussion. I guess, I would just observe that I think, as you maybe pointed out, I think there are a number of these points that we have either addressed or progressed with. There's a couple that probably should be looked at and worked, but I think we, in the interim here, since it's been a little while since this report came to us, I think by and large it's been things have kind of gone in the direction that would have been recommended by the group. So, any further comments? Okay. And,
all right, so with that in mind, Mr. Mayor.
You have a motion you want to make?
Yep, I do. So I'm going to bring a motion to set a path for the facade improvement program. And so my motion is that we set two deadlines for the public. The first deadline is June 30th of 2026. And that is the deadline for the program as it sits today. Okay, all the program parameters. I look to Mr. Billingsley. I'm thinking of that as an application deadline. Is that the right way to think of that? Okay, so we'll go with an application deadline of June 30th for today's program parameters as they are. So that's 100,000 for a face, 180,000 for a corner, all of the rest of the program parameters as they sit today. So that's the first part of the motion. Okay, Michaela, are you?
I'm trying.
So really, all that we need is current program through June 30. That's the main crux right now. And then the second part of the motion is for a reduced program in terms of the dollars that has an application deadline of December 31, 2027. Okay, so nearly 2 years from today, that program would have a $30,000 per face and $50,000 for a corner. So everything else remains the same, cost shares, all of those things, but just adjust the dollars with an application end date of December 31, 2027. That's the motion.
I'll second.
Second by Alderman Samuelson. Discussion of the motion. Alderman Fuller.
Quick question, and Mike, I appreciate what you're doing there. With the December 2027 deadline, how long do we give them after that to finish the work if we set that deadline? Because I think that has to be prioritized too, right? Say you have 12 months, 24 months, whatever it is to finish that work.
And I'll defer, Mr. Mayor, if those that know the numbers.
That's already outlined.
I think it's in
program.
there, right? So if we don't change anything else, it would follow those same, yep. Is that?
Mr. Billingsley?
Good evening, Mayor Janser and members of the council. With every applicant that is approved for a forgivable loan, there is a contract that's set up that is approved by the council and executed by the mayor. And in that contract, there is a deadline to complete the work. That deadline is usually about 1 year in time. Okay.
Okay, I think that clears that up. Any further discussion? Alderman Olson.
This would be a question for Alderman Blessing. So I'm assuming then that the sunset is 2027, so the program would go away after 2027 with your motion.
Yep, that would be my intent, Mr. Mayor. And now, with that in mind, we would have budgeting work to do because we may have some in the pipeline. But yes, it would be closed to new applications December 31, 2027. So nearly 2 years from today.
Okay, further discussion. Alderman Olson.
So I'm going to vote against this motion, and impartial, my reasoning impartial is that the council can vote on every application. And so I don't know that reducing the amount, and reducing it that drastically is what is the best way to run this program. If we've denied requests recently, and so the council has that authority to do that. We've also seen success with the program in the amounts that we have been giving. We've seen the values of those properties going up, which then has in turn brought in more property tax for us. So I know that there is some heartburn with the program, but I can't vote for this motion.
Further discussion. Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'm going to vote no on it, but I would like to have this discussion further, just for the simple fact that Brian Billingsley and the Renaissance Zone Board has put together, Mark Lima, we've put a lot of work into the future of this program on changing the applicant, the cost share program, the future of the program, moving into different parts of the or parts of the community. And again, we've seen the successes. You know, you're talking to one of the applicants on a Renaissance Zone application earlier today, or earlier this meeting. I talked to one of the members of that organization, and again, to their point, even with these things, sometimes with these programs, sometimes without, these things just don't pencil out. They're so close. They go to the bank, hey, I need an extra 0.5%, otherwise this doesn't pencil out. And we can do our part as council members and reduce the taxes, but we're only one part of that puzzle. Taxes are high, insurance is high, cost of construction is high. So again, I think providing these tools is important. We've seen the impact within our community. Again, I'm not opposed to making changes. I'd like to actually maybe direct staff to bring this on as an action item at our one of our next or the next two, depending on the workload of those meetings on this program with the work that the Renaissance Zone Board has done, and have maybe just a more in-depth discussion on what those dollar amounts, and I can't recall them off the top of my head, but there was a pretty lengthy discussion at those Renaissance Board meetings on what the future of that program looks like. So I'll vote no on this tonight, but again, I would like to see it on from Brian. As an action item and what that program looks like. Because again, we talk to the applicants, that Renaissance Zone Board speaks with the applicants, works with the applications, deals with the cost of construction of some of these projects. And I'd like that input when making this decision.
Further discussion. Alderman Samuelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will support this. I would prefer that it end on June 30th of 2026, but I can accept this proposal, and I appreciate it, Mike. There's a lot of things that we can talk about when we talk about impact and things like that, and several people today have talked about how the costs have gone up and how expensive everything is. This is adding costs to the taxpayer, no matter how you look at it, whether you're using sales tax or not. And it's taking money out of their pocket and putting it in someone else's pocket. Our program is very lucrative. There's nobody that comes close to this facade improvement program that we have. What Alderman Blessum is proposing is closer to what other cities that have them is at. Because I believe Mandan is at $30,000. To me, just to be fair, programs like this, it's taking money out of the pockets of our citizens, and it's harder for them to make ends meet. So I will support this.
I'm sorry. Further discussion. Okay, seeing none, we are ready to vote on the motion.
The motion passed 4-3 with dissent from Janser, Olson, and Pittner.
All right. I believe that concludes item 10.2. We are on to item 11.
So moved.
Move we adjourn.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Blessing.
city manager has distributed a memo
Oh,
that
yes.
I think we can take up during this section.
Yep. Good. Okay, Lance, do you want to run through this?
Yes, briefly, my apologies, council, for the very late memo. We don't like doing that, but sometimes things pop up and we have to make quick decisions. And we're up against a grant window, and that's basically why we're talking about it late in the game here. We've been talking about applying for several rail grants over the last month and a half or so. We've been structuring that program to apply for a corridor study that would study rail crossings through an 11-mile corridor from basically the west edge of Minot through Surrey. And that line of thinking was in alignment with past notice of funding opportunities or NOFOs, trying to align what we think the feds are going to ask for in these grants. Ultimately, the goal is to try to increase corridor safety, but look for a good project that would be successful in Minot. Now that some of these NOFOs from the new administration have dropped, the thinking has changed. So this administration is very pro-project. Let's get it built, and less so on the study phase. So our previous approach likely was not going to be successful. And so what we've learned and what we're proposing now is not doing a corridor study, but rather focusing on what we would call a point project, or focusing on one project that we feel would have a successful chance of obtaining a federal grant. That would be a grade separation project at 27th Street, so on the east edge of Minot. That project has several benefits, which I listed in the memo. BNSF feels that would be a very strong project in a lot of the federal grants that are out or coming out soon. They felt so strong that they've actually offered to take on more of the cost share if we were successful in obtaining one of these federal grants. So the city would pay about $50,000 more than what we had anticipated with a corridor study. BNSF would probably pick up closer to $370,000, depending on what the final scope is of this project, but more than half of the local share. The grant funding for a few of these grants, the window is closing to apply, and so that's why we wanted to bring this in front of you tonight, so that you have an expectation or you have kind of full sight on what we got going on here. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those. Apologize again for the late memo.
City Attorney?
Mayor, members of council, so just as a kind of a clerical matter, so this was not on the agenda for tonight's meeting, but the general rules of parliamentary procedure allow members during a regular meeting, which this is, it's not a special meeting, it's regular agenda, you can add items to the agenda as an action item. So my recommendation would be that the council entertain a motion to add this item as an action item.
So moved.
And then move and second that,
Okay.
then proceed with a vote on the
Okay,
matter.
moved and seconded to add this as an action item as directed by the city attorney. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote.
The motion passed unanimously.
Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, I'll move to approve the item.
Okay, motion to approve the item.
Second.
Second by Alderman Fuller. Any discussion or questions for the city engineer, Alderman Blessing?
Yep. So Lance, and you and I had a discussion about this earlier, so I'm pretty well up to speed, but I just want to make sure that we're clear on what we're talking about. What we're going after now is we are obligating ourselves, if a grant were to come through, for $150,000 as part of the local share that needs to go into that. If we're not approved, nothing happens, right? So BNSF they've engaged consultants, they're pushing and trying to make this all work. I know there's time, we're putting effort into it, but we're not expending real dollars unless something comes through. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessing, you're correct.
Okay, and if I can continue, Mr. Mayor, so then if we were successful and all of this came together down the road, what we end up with, and I'm just gonna paraphrase fast here, so fill in any details, we end up with what's likely to be an overpass at the tracks east of the fairgrounds, on the northeast corner of the fairgrounds. That's a much better intersection. It sets us up for the industrial growth that we expect to happen in northeast Minot, and all of the pieces that come along with that. And the reason that I bring that up is I think people have heard me say before, I don't want to go find funding in search of a project. I want a good project, and then we find the funding. This seems to fit that. And I guess I just wanted your opinion on that. You know our CIP, you know the obligations we have coming. Does this fit with where we're headed? Is this where we should be going?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessum, I agree with you. Had it not been for some of these opportunities, I don't think this project would have risen to the top as quickly. However, it is a good long-term project for the city, especially with some of the development activities that are rapidly moving ahead. We know that in the future, if this continues to develop and then other industry spurs off of that development, eventually this is going to be a needed project. These federal funding opportunities that are specific to grade separations, it's kind of a carve-out, if you will, in the federal programs, is probably once in a generation. And so I think the city can get a good win here if you put together a project that promotes our long-term economic success in northeast Minot. We've already invested a lot of money in utility infrastructure to make sure that area can develop. And then we can take advantage of the partnership that we have with BNSF, where they're willing to cost share on not only the design of the facility, but the construction. Where if we would try to go this alone someday, it would be 100% on us. So I think this is a good project, and it just so happens the funding sources are lining up in a good way for us.
All right, Alderman Hayes.
Will this impact the trust company on the west side and part of Farstad?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Hayes, it's too early to tell. One of the things that we do during a project like this through the environmental clearance is you start looking at right-of-way limits, property impacts, and those are obviously communicated, and it can be a large part of the project cost. So that's something that has to be thought of and designed around and then eventually communicated. So right now, we don't know that.
And if so, will this funding cover the relocation of primarily the MBS trusts on the west side?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Hayes, the way that this would work is this is basically the first step in a long process. So if we would start the engineering with this successful grant, we would know what the property impacts are, the approximate cost, and the project would be environmentally cleared from the feds to move forward. Then the city would have the option to go and find a federal construction grant, either build or FS or FPS or one of the other grants to help get the project built. Right-of-way costs are eligible expenses within those grants.
Thank you.
Further discussion or questions?
Mr. Mayor, just
Alderman
one
Blessing.
for the city attorney. It doesn't feel quite right to not have an agenda item that the public could have heard about. I mean, especially with Alderman Hayes's questions about property owner impacts. Do you have any concern or anything with that about this coming in during a meeting? Our rules seem to allow it. I don't know that we're doing anything illegal, but that's a different question than are we doing right by the public?
Absolutely. So Mayor, Alderman Blessum, so I have the Attorney General's open meetings manual up in front of me right now, and just reading aloud from that, it states that topics for the agenda are to be included into the notice if practicable. However, except for emergency or special meetings, a governing body's failure to file an agenda with its notice of meeting or departure from a stated agenda does not affect the validity of the meeting or actions taken at the meeting. A governing body is free to discuss any topic at a regular meeting as long as notice of the meeting listed all the topics the governing body expected to discuss when the notice was prepared. So this came up after the agenda deadline, just for context for those listening at home in the gallery. If no statute, ordinance, resolution, rule, or bylaw specifies other procedures, general rules of parliamentary procedure allow members during a regular meeting to add items to the agenda as new business, or here it would be an action item underneath our policy. So it's added in accordance with state law, and it won't be invalidated, but it's something that I don't know if the grant deadline would be affected if we continued this to allow further notice or comment to the public, or
I think
what that
part of the issue that we're up against is time, right? So the consultant that the railroad hired, they have to get started tomorrow to try to make this grant deadline. One thing to add, let's say that we're successful in obtaining this grant. This will be back in front of council for award. We're gonna have to enter into a federal contract. We'll have to go through consultant selections, so there'll be several more opportunities to have any kind of comment in front of the city council, just because of all the steps we'll have to go through to initiate a project.
So I don't know if that offers any clarity here. It's not traditional course of action where we would be making votes or adding something late to the agenda or miscellaneous discussion, but we've followed as much of the procedure as we can under the circumstances.
Yeah, and I guess, Mr. Mayor, if I could, I get a little check with that. I feel it, but I think with what the city engineer just talked about, there are multiple steps in this process. If we are moving forward with more of them, we will want to hear from the public on what thoughts they have, because I think for most of us, this came up now. I mean, literally today. So we're trying to wrap our arms around it, and the public will need to do the same, and there'll be opportunity to do that. Okay.
Okay, so we have motion and a second. I see no further discussion. Lance, thank you.
You're welcome.
And let's go ahead and record our votes.
The motion passed unanimously.
Okay, and with that, we're back on item 11.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.